worried about secret backdoors, but the front door and the garage are literally just open.
10 years ago, we broke the OPSEC of the most secretive special mission unit on the planet, IDs and location data from the devices that operators carry every day, provided the fragments. I did it from a home office. If I can do it, certainly our adversaries are doing it.
What I'm hearing from you is that our phones are actually a battleground. Last week, Senator Ron Wyden, the longest-serving member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, released an open letter to the Department of War, which was co-signed by bipartisan senators and congressmen, demanding that the Department of War address a huge problem. Apparently, our adversaries can track our service members when they're deployed abroad by their cell phone signatures, meaning where they are with their cell phone can be used as a targeting tool to literally send warheads, drones, other weapons. And according to the letter, we've lost service members due to this threat. One of the facts that the letter points out is that a decade ago, an intelligence contractor raised this issue with the defense and intelligence community. And today we have that contractor here with us. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
That's Mike Yeagley, for the record, by the way. He's the unnamed contractor in the letter. So, Mike, give us an understanding of sort of what your job is and why you're referenced in this letter.
For a long time, I've been a contractor to the Department of Defense and the intelligence community in this space that we call commercial data, which is emerging as sort of this very bespoke intelligence capability using the very same commercial systems for advertising and other effects for intelligence purposes, whether it be targeting, offensive or defensive purposes. I've been doing that for a long time.
So the letter described an event about a decade ago where you sort of blew the whistle internally and showed the Department of Defense at the time that commercial advertising data can be used to follow our people around in real time, and that this data doesn't need to be hacked. It's actually just available for purchase. Can you tell us that story? I think a lot of people will be amazed to hear how that went.
To just put it very clearly, 10 years ago, we broke the OPSEC of the most secretive special mission unit on the planet, not through hacks or exploits or other methods. IDs and location data from the devices that operators carry every day, provided the fragments to attribute those operators to what's called a forward operating base that was situated inside an abandoned cement factory in Syria. And as we examined that cement factory, we were able to attribute those devices, obviously, to an access-only compound within Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as well as the residential addresses of many of these devices that we were seeing in this abandoned cement factory in Syria. I did it from a home office. I did it without a priori knowledge. I didn't know what I was looking for. This cement factory emerged as I was looking for where are people associated with Fort Bragg currently. And when we ran that through the processing and pressed play on the map, the cement factory emerged very loudly. And I'm taking that use case to the Joint Special Operations Command and explaining to them precisely what I did, how I did it, where I did it, and that I wasn't looking for their secret operating base, started to raise that level of understanding of the risks associated with this surveillance economy that we all live in.
So you bought smartphone advertising data. So this is from basically marketing firms, or help us understand a little bit of where this data is bought, and then we'll talk about what you saw when you looked at it.
The data market is very vibrant, and there are a lot of companies collecting data radiating from your device for the purposes of targeting you based upon context and intent to better understand how to put the right ad on your phone. It's as simple as that. In fact, in the advertising marketing world, some of the best geointelligence analysts kind of invented this commercial geospatial targeting. And so, yeah, with a credit card, I was able to buy a, um, a sample of data. It's funny because when I started approaching these suppliers, uh, not really understanding how they would react, um, we developed a what we call a cover for action. So, had a use case associated with the refugees along the Syrian-Turkish border, with the intent being to better understand who are these refugees, to appropriate the right services, and to be ready for the flow of refugees, to better understand how many women, how many children, family units, where are they coming from, things like that. And so the commercial brokers, the suppliers, were not used to dealing in those regions because there's not a huge ad market along the Syrian Turkish border. And so when posed with the question, do you even have data? They didn't even know. They had to go and examine what is it that we have? What are we collecting? And come to find out, the data flowing from your device doesn't care whether you're in a vibrant advertising market. It's collecting and it's extracting. And so the suppliers were like, yeah, we have data. We don't usually monetize it. It's usually on the cutting room, ends up on the cutting room floor because nobody's buying it. So what would you like to do? And we created a market.
That's wild. So the data is being collected by apps on all phones, regardless of where they are, and you just happen to request data from Syria. I want to call out for people too something you described, which is you called it cover for action. So you went to these marketing firms and described yourself as a NGO or whatever, trying to map out the flow of refugees in Syria to do a humanitarian effort. And that was the cover for what you were actually doing, which is show me where the US special operators are. And so, okay, so in that data that you get, which is basically a map, a geographical map with device identifiers moving over time. So it's sort of like watching Find My Friend on iPhone, but just over time as a movie. You were able to identify devices that were concentrating in a pattern together at an abandoned cement factory, and those devices also happen to be congregating at Fort Bragg.
Correct. So as we're looking at these devices, we're able to attribute them to Fort Bragg because we see them there regularly, and then we're seeing them at this abandoned cement factory. The pattern of life for these devices emerged. So understanding uh, their um, their routines. Who do they socialize with? Where do they go to the grocery store? Where do they work out? Where do their wives work out? Where do their kids go to school? Where do they go to church? The pattern of life resolves itself with a very, very high degree of specificity because we're talking about latitude and longitude in terms of the location. Um, and so looking at that pattern of life and then understanding this is where the device dwells between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., we're able to infer that this is where they live. And layering other data sets, we're able to resolve those identities. And when we
Yep.
presented that to the command with names associated, um, the meeting got very spicy.
So yeah, let's bring everyone there to the extent that we can. So we're in some sort of secret, Mike, you're a guy with clearance levels. Okay, so we're in a special room with certain clearances and above, and you start sharing with these people the pattern of life of their colleagues who are ultra secret operators. And this data was purchased and could have been purchased by anyone.
That's right. So this is where the community started to get a little uncomfortable. I will tell you, it's the first time I've ever been called directly to my face a charlatan, a snake oil salesman, been accused of hacking. How did you get this data? How are you able to do this? One of the presentation artifacts was a picture of a residence in a town in a community called Southern Pines, North Carolina. And when that house came up, there were 3 people in the room that knew exactly whose house that was. And so the community or the command's perspective is that this type of data is only available through special capabilities where we're intercepting mobile data from cell phone towers and other sophisticated techniques. And when I had to boil it down for them and explain that I didn't hack, intercept, or steal the data, I bought it, that became a pivotal moment in the OPSEC vernacular.
This is key. So yeah, I mean, this wasn't a result of like a drone with an IMSI catcher or something. Like one of the things that strikes me when you tell this story and when I read about this is that this is like a classic blind spot, right? Like we've got this huge edifice of fortifications to protect us from all these known exotic risks, but there's this giant blind spot. What I often say is like, we're worried about secret back doors, but like the front door and the garage are literally just open while we're, peeking through the blinds in the back door, right? This sounds like one of those moments.
Yeah, no doubt. Because the a special mission unit takes operational security very seriously. It is a series of techniques and practices and protocols that are unique and unlike anything that uh, you know conventional military units do not have to undergo. They take it very, very seriously. Um, and when we're looking at a pattern of life of the most secretive operators in our military, it became this moment of um, they were almost in disbelief that despite everything that they do to protect an operation from observation by an adversary, um, a guy sitting in a home office is pointing at the pattern of life of that secretive special mission unit. And that was something that they were not prepared to have to deal with.
So when we take that moment 10 years ago where you've identified that ordinary smartphone advertising data, this is the information used to sell us breakfast cereal when we're at Safeway or, a drill when we're at Home Depot. So this is temporal based real time data. When you show this intelligence and special operator community, hey, this is a really dangerous vulnerability. That's 10 years ago. Today, we have, 10 years later, Senator Wyden's letter is saying that our deployed soldiers recently were targeted and killed based on the real-time information streaming from their phones. So does that sound real to you? Or are we having American soldiers killed due to smartphone advertising data?
Apparently, 10 years later, the risk is still acute and it's very real. And this was the essence of my alert to the command was if I can do it, certainly our adversaries are doing it.
That's shocking. The idea that we would spend trillions of dollars on a military to protect our forces, and then they're carrying around phones to communicate with their families, check the internet, and those consumer devices are infiltrating the battle space and creating this huge vulnerability. No wonder Senator Wyden is raising the alarm. It does seem to me, though, as delighted as I am that this letter is bringing this issue to the forefront, that in fact the letter's perhaps referencing some out of date items, that it's sort of looking backwards at where the threat was and that it's much larger now. So one of the things I wanted to ask you to unpack a little bit is, 10 years ago when you called out ad IDs as the thing you were watching, that has resulted over time in things that have happened on the various technology platforms, et cetera, to reduce the prevalence of ad IDs as the number one signal that apps are using. Now, even though ad IDs, which are reduced in use from things like Ask App Not to Track on iPhone and Android, the data market is bigger than ever. The advertising to mobile market is bigger than ever. So that would seem to indicate from a technology perspective that the ad ID is actually not the main thing being tracked anymore for these data markets. So help us understand how the tracking from apps has evolved from what 10 years ago might have been the ad ID, which no one really thought about, and to what it is today. It sounds like it's really kind of more diffuse now than just a single identifier.
Yep, it's one of those unintended consequences. So privacy reforms, we're all familiar with privacy reforms and what states and federal governments are doing and what the platforms are doing. Privacy reforms actually expanded the risk surface. Platforms constrained the ad IDs and location data, giving users some options. So the applications just went deeper into the device, multiplying that attribution surface into what is the best way to describe it is diagnostic telemetry. The behavior of your device as an app is running is an accessible data field, and there are thousands of them, for the app to collect and attempt to resolve behavior. In many ways, this diagnostic telemetry is more probative than the ad ID ever was, because we're getting very, very specific diagnostic information that, when combined through AI, resolves these fragmented data elements into a very discernible, readable, understandable behavior profile, which sort of takes us to this notion that behavior is the new identity, is the new identifier. And that is where the letter and the senator's position focuses on ad IDs. The applications, that collection layer, has adapted to the post-privacy environment.
So what I'm hearing is Senator Wyden's letter is definitely bringing attention, which is really needed. But the prescription in his letter, if we were to follow them, would not actually solve the problem because the problem has evolved. I also, you mentioned some distinctions here, which we might want to walk people through. So the ad ID, for anyone who hasn't heard of this before, it's a number. It's sort of like a serial number associated with a device that advertisers can use to very efficiently and easily say, oh, this is the same phone that was at Home Depot yesterday. Now it's at Safeway. Here it's going to the school, et cetera. As privacy reforms from GDPR to customer permissions have suppressed the ubiquity or the universality of ad ID availability, the need for data has not gone down, it's increased. So apps are using other signals. And you mentioned that there's dozens of them. So, we should probably just unpack this a little bit. Everything on your device, from its particular operating system version, how much memory is left, the times of day you use it more, even the accelerometer information, whether you're still walking in a car, etc., screen size, security patch updates, things you never could imagine. Taken together, these form these sort of facets of a diamond that become the replacement of the ad ID. Is that right?
Yeah. No single field is dispositive, but every field, every telemetry field added to the model sharpens behavioral resolution. And, we have this, we had a very sort of fixed OPSEC risk window. And the behavioral telemetry takes that OPSEC risk window from a time and place to protect the app, and we're now having to protect the app along a continuum that includes before, during, and after the operation. So where the ad ID and location data were allowing us to sort of put operators in time and place, we are now in a place where not only can we put them in time and place without an ad ID or location data, we are now able to affix with probability the behavior of that device as an indicator of operational intent, operational context, and from an adversarial perspective, which goes back to my warning 10 years ago, this is a lower risk way of interfering with operations, intercepting operations, being able to allocate resources to disrupt operations by virtue of the behavioral signals radiating from devices carried by sensitive personnel, special mission unit operators, case officers, the spectrum of national security personnel who all carry personal devices, and those personal devices intersect with their professional lives. And those are signals, if we're thinking about this from an adversarial perspective, those are highly valuable signals to understand at the most foundational substrate of how our people behave, becomes a risk that in many ways is beyond the cognitive capacity to control, because a lot of the models are so complex we can't even sort of contemplate their sophistication. And what's important, Joe, is the telemetry on a device is not considered to be personally identifiable. So we don't control that data. We don't get to tell the device, suppress it. In many cases, we don't even know what the app is collecting. And that expands this risk surface beyond anything that the ad ID or precise location data was providing.
That's a really good point. I mean, in another conversation, I think we can talk about some innovations that will enable us to do that. But I think you're putting a really good point on the threat landscape has changed. And to me, this is the major theme that I'm picking up from you, which is not only has the amount of data that apps are using to identify an individual pattern of life increased over this 10 years, which it obviously has, but also the ability to process this information dynamically, predictively with artificial intelligence, that has gone up a hockey stick curve in terms of its capability. What I'm getting at as a result of that, though, is it sort of brought us into a new world that I'm not sure a lot of us realize we're in, which is the divisions we think about. Like, I'm watching Band of Brothers with my sons these days. So they're all about it, right? And, I look back at this World War II and there's these lines that everyone's deployed, right? I can't wait to go home. There's this strict separation of like the war and the homeland. And what I'm hearing from you is that division is gone in a world where our personal lives are trackable by the phones that our adversaries can identify we're in a potential combat space with, but also not just that. This is not just for people in combat or who might be special operators, but anyone working in the infrastructure to support our efforts, which could include government, Department of War, intelligence, but also, defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, people developing our weapons, it seems to me like as this division goes away and we enter this gray zone of our personal data becoming part of the battlefield, that our phones are actually a battleground, that the population that this affects is potentially really broad. Am I getting that right, or would our adversaries not care?
The compounding effects of understanding the operational rhythms go far and wide across that spectrum of readiness. So anything can be collected and interpreted for its value as an indicator and warning. I mean, look, you talk about sort of World War II, the situation, the environment that we're in now, um, assumed a fundamental substrate, and that fundamental substrate was ambiguity. We were all kind of ambiguous. There wasn't a model, and there wasn't a system, and there wasn't an economy that was doing everything it could do every day, incentivized to understand everything about us. And the operator and the operational community, the national security community, by and large, just needed to sort of stay inside that ambiguity. Ambiguity has eroded by virtue of the commercial incentives, and that is, I would characterize that's the essence of this challenge. Is our ability to be ambiguous has collapsed by virtue of our desire and need to be connected. And when we lose ambiguity, it's difficult to protect a specific operation, because that continuum, that OPSEC continuum, started well before the operation. The tempo, the rhythm, the preparation, everybody, everything involved is now projecting an indicator that something is going to happen, something is getting ready to launch, because we're not ambiguous anymore.
That's a big concept to consider if we really think about how far that reaches, because again, like, the notion of like, don't salute the officers, there's snipers around, like we're talking about the complete other end of the spectrum, in which basically the movement and behavior of everyone is sortable to understand who's meeting with who, what that might mean. When you combine that with a little bit of open source information, it seems to me like our adversaries can map our phone behavior to profile us the same way we profile like the Taliban. I mean, is it any better than that, or is that pretty much the situation?
Again, if we're doing it, certainly an adversary is doing it. The infrastructure has been built and supported by a duopoly and a huge economy. So it's almost like the commercial economy has provided our adversary with a cheat code to be able to, with a degree of lower risk, very, very high cost effectiveness, and very little friction, be able to understand at a very granular level the behavioral patterns of people that we need to protect for adversarial purposes and for national security purposes. The things that they're going to be looking for. If you think about the metrics are just a little different. An advertiser wants to convert you into a customer. They want you to buy. They want you to purchase. They want you to travel. The adversary has a different conversion metrics, but the indicators, the context, the intent are driven by the very same data derivatives that an advertiser will use.
It's important you raise this because, again, in the old world, if you wanted to know who at Lockheed was meeting with who, you'd maybe have to get some moles in the company, right? Which is high risk, slow, expensive, risky, right? But now there's this sort of cheat code, as you said. I wonder in this world of what you've called ubiquitous technical surveillance, right, where phones are basically providing all this information that can be sorted to understand what's happening, it would seem to me, again, like it's not just the deployed soldier who's at risk or the operator who's about to go on a secret mission or even, the designers of new weapons. But as the lines blur between the battlefield and the homeland, these risks would seem to me to extend to first responders, law enforcement. I mean, I'm seeing right now these wild, operational protests against ICE officers trying to dox them. Obviously, like it looks to me, at least, I'm not a pro here, but sophisticated forces appear to be involved in preparing, funding, training these groups. It just doesn't seem like a big leap to me from the soldiers mentioned in Senator Wyden's letter to our federal law enforcement, or am I making too big of a leap?
I don't think so at all. And I think it's highly probable that an adversary is using these methods to provide targeting information to local groups that are engaging against our law enforcement, to know exactly where to be, what that posture looks like, and then to be able to track the law enforcement officer, special agent, criminal investigator back to their private lives, and interfere, disrupt, confront in that environment, it would clearly be an adversarial operation using these techniques, these data sets, to be able to, again, with a different effect than an advertiser, but the mechanics are the same, to be able to ferment the chaos, and social fragmentation that we have been experiencing for almost 10 years now.
It does seem interesting that the availability of this data and the rate of these highly polarizing operations seem to go hand in hand. That may not be a coincidence.
It's not a coincidence, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's important to hear that from you because, you're someone who is informed about this stuff when it comes to what we do.
We do these what are called sort of red teams or these simulations. And when I present this, here's how I would conduct this if I were an adversary, particularly for a social influence operation where you can segment a community and inject the fractures with such precision, and steer it to your desired outcome. This is not overly sophisticated, and certainly not beneath the capability of a technically capable adversary like Iran, like China, and that's where anything. I'm pleased and thrilled that the Senate is finally taking notice. The problem far exceeds management of ad IDs. And so if this is the opportunity to have a much larger conversation about securing the data heartland of the United States, then let's bring it.
You just described the opportunity, Mike, which is to protect the data heartland. And I think one of the things you've helped me understand too, because again, I spent the last decade at Apple developing a lot of the stuff that, billions of people are living on. And I don't think a lot of us realize here, you've helped me to think about this differently, that in China, the internet works totally differently. And it is unlike here, it's not a public advertising, data harvesting bonanza that anyone can access. And like, for example, when an iPhone is sold in China, the Apple services running on that iPhone are not on Apple servers. They're on CCP servers. There's a bunch of Apple services that just are not available in China. Facebook, all of the Meta products are not available in China. So our adversaries are taking a different approach, and they sort of designed their internet based on different rules. So is that correct, that like while our stuff is available for purchase very easily by anyone, theirs is not?
100%. If you think about from the data market, the data economy, there's not a ton of reciprocity from the China-based apps and infrastructure in terms of sharing their population data with American advertisers for the purposes of advertising. It is a very one-way relationship. And you could argue that maybe they take the seriousness of data and have applied it to public policy. They built, it's metaphorically accurate, a great firewall around their country to protect data. Now, is it because they are very concerned about the privacy rights of their citizens? Of course not. But they recognize the consequences of those granular data sets getting into the hands of their adversaries and how those could be weaponized against them. And we don't have a policy or a posture that matches the CCP's maximalist policy related to securing their data heartland.
I think it's really interesting you say that, Mike, because like what I'm imagining when you say that is like, the hierarchy of needs, as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right? So it's like, physical security is higher than like the luxury of privacy. And we tend to think of data privacy as like a perk, but other people understand it actually is an asset related to their physical safety and security. And it sounds like it may be time for us to wake up to that. Okay, so in a world where we have our mobile internet, which is totally subsidized by advertising, I think a lot of people don't realize this. When you buy an iPhone, it is largely subsidized by the future usage of that iPhone with Google search. Google pays Apple lots of money, it's reported, to be the primary search engine. Of course, applications need to make money. They derive a huge amount of data on the device, sell this for advertising purposes. And this operates totally different from how the Chinese platforms controlled by the CCP operate. So in this new world that I think we're a lot further into than we realize, it's not over, though we are really far into this, and the risk is really big. Our perspective, we really believe that innovation is going to be the answer here, even more than regulation, though regulation, I think, is going to play a really important part. And we think that this letter from Senator Wyden and this window that he's given the Department of War, which is about a month to come back with answers, is a really great time to bring attention to this issue. And what I'm hearing from you for this whole sort of 10-year saga is what we think of as the sort of perk of privacy is actually like a safety and security requirement. And we kind of need to, like, it sounds like a little childish that we haven't been awake to this.
When I describe privacy as an operational substrate, the loss of ambiguity and how that creates that security continuum, people do think of privacy as some kind of bougie lifestyle choice, when in reality, it extends well beyond lifestyle. It extends well beyond, wanting to have, the ability to surf the internet without cookies. The way in which the operational environment is configured today, and it's only going to get worse, is we need to have some degree of ambiguity. We don't need to reinvent a Delta Force operator as a public school bus driver. Cover anonymity, are sort of the wrong targets. What we need to reassert is some degree of personal ambiguity, so that not every behavioral pattern, change, deviation in your diagnostic profile is giving an adversary, ample indicator and warning that you're about to launch. And so, privacy as more of a philosophical uh, understanding in terms of what that provides the individual, agency, freedom, the ability to think without being manipulated. Um, Judge Brandeis coined it the ability to be the right to be left alone. That becomes a very important operational substrate that doesn't start the moment before an operation is gonna launch. It starts the moment you take the oath and enter, your entry on duty oath, and throughout your career and after your career, because all of your operational activity, everything that you thought you were hiding, is going to follow you around. And so this notion of ambiguity, um, as this fundamental start point, starts with privacy.
And I think a big theme here is that a lot of the tools we think we need to get there are the wrong tools for the wrong time, right? So a lot of the things I'll hear is, well, use a VPN. And it's like, first of all, VPNs are good things. That's a good invention that was created for desktops that were remaining in one place, right? So obscuring an IP address is a good thing to do. But I don't think a lot of people realize if you have a VPN on a mobile device, which again, VPNs were originally designed for stationary machines. When you're on a mobile device and you go from your home internet and you leave the house and you get on a cell signal, that the application sees that. It has metadata about the cell signal, which includes not your IP address, but it includes what state you're in, the time zone, the country code, really specific information, right? So you think your VPN says you're in Brazil, but the application sees the second you're on cell signal, it sees, oh, Joe's in Northern California, right? And what does that mean? That when I fly from Northern California to DC to meet up with you, my application is sending through the VPN. Joe's not really in Brazil. He was in Northern California today. He's in DC today. Oh, and who else happens to be here? Mike flew in. Oh, and I mean, in real time with the ad ID off and the VPN on, we just gave away the whole farm, right? So I think as we wake up to the size of this threat, I think we need to start reimagining the tools that are going to help us solve the problem, because today's threats are not going to be addressed with yesterday's tools.
And that's where we get to the opportunity for the Department of War CIO to instead of responding to the letter that deals with the acute threat a decade ago, the opportunity is to respond to Senator Wyden and his co-signing colleagues, that I hear what you're saying. Let us explain to you the real operational threat as it exists today and what we're doing about it.
Yeah.
To spend taxpayer money trying to build capability to systematically disable the ad ID. If it makes you feel better to do that and gives you the ability to respond affirmatively to the Senate that you're taking action, fine. But the opportunity now is to take stock of what those risks are, and implement solutions, policy, strategy that looks beyond the threat today and provides some resilience across this growing, emerging threat that's imposed by that commercial ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's the right call to action. I mean, it's going to be a lot of things. So, for our part, we want to raise as much detail in this conversation during this window as possible. And this conversation, Mike, is a really important part of that. So I have a feeling we'll be talking again here in the coming weeks. But this has been incredibly insightful, and I'm just really thankful. Again, the fact that you raised this issue 10 years ago and innovated a way to explain that and have been helping our government. I just want to thank you, too, for helping us try to cover our tracks in this area. But now is a really opportune time to reset our standards so that this incredibly exposed flank can be addressed, because this danger is just unacceptable. If what Senator Wyden's letter is saying is true and Americans are being killed as a result of this, which seems to be obviously the case, this has to get dealt with. So thank you again, and we'll be back soon. Peace, guys. God bless.